What's going on, guys? K-Pine here, and welcome back to Season 17 of the GOBattleLeague. Thank you guys for bearing with me while I've been away from the channel for a little bit, but I do plan on being back and bringing you all content, good teams, and their breakdowns for the new season, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with those teams and my content. And in this video, I'll be featuring two newly buffed Pokemon in the Great League, Vigoroth and Talonflame. I originally ran this team with Toxicroak instead of Talonflame to test out its new move of Shadow Ball, so if you're curious about that, I can tell you that Shadow Ball is definitely a side grade and not an upgrade. While it is used for coverage in some situations, I definitely found the need to have Sludge Bomb more than I did Shadow Ball, but that could be situational based on your team. I did end up switching Toxie out for Talon, and this team performed a lot better. Lanturn is a fantastic Pokemon this season, especially with the buff to Steel Wing and Skarmory that has a lot of positive matchups. Vigoroth is probably the best save switch now since it's been given access to Rock Slide to replace the abysmal move of Bulldoze. Yes, even over Sableye. And Talonflame? Well, it was already good, but its Incinerate damage is now just insane. Talon's also been given access to Fly, or you would run that instead of Brave Bird, but I'm out of charge TM, so I'm sticking with Brave Bird. While I do think Fly is the better move overall, Brave Bird does serve its purposes and is in fact the better move when it comes to the zero and most one-shield scenarios. But Fly is undoubtedly better in the twos. This team does have its core breakers in the likes of Dunsparce and G-Fisk, but if you avoid those, it can really do well. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Lanturn into the mirror. I'm going to load up and throw Thunderbolt right away. Whether my opponent places CMP tire or not, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to save swap into my Vigoroth as soon as they throw their first move. I'm swapping into my Vigoroth to check out if they have something in the back that my Talonflame is weak to that my Vigoroth can draw out, such as a Jellicent, such as a Toxapex, and a Azumarill. Vigoroth does a really good job at being able to bring those out. But in this situation, my opponent just stays in, and now they bring in a Talonflame. And the good thing about this matchup is normally Vigoroth would just have to spam out Body Slides, but it has access to the double super effective Rock Slide. And my opponent knows that. So it's a very, very tough no-shield call for them. So I go for the Body Slam bait. I'm successful in the first one, and I'm going for it again. See if my opponent is going to double shield their Talonflame. They do, and that is going to allow me to reach the Rock Slide right before I get farmed down. Vigoroth putting in an absolute ton of work in this very first game, showing you just how strong of a safe swap it can be. In the back, my opponent has Trevenant, and Talon comes in to close it out. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Lanturn into Arctibax. Pretty bad lead for us, so we are going to swap into our Vigoroth right away. In comes a Clodsire, and I'm not going to win this matchup. So I'm looking to get a shield advantage somewhere I possibly can, or I'm looking to get it into a farm down range for the Talonflame. If my opponent does end up over farming too much and gives me switch, perfect. But if they don't, I will look to get energy onto my Talon here, since my Lanturn can't really spark down. And where's that energy going to go into the Arctibax? Nowhere. Anything my Lanturn can throw is double resisted, so this is perfect farm down range for my Talon. So I'm just going to get 2 Incinerates worth of damage. Down goes the Clodsire, and we're going to see what my opponent wants to do. They're going to bring in the Arctibax or the third Pokemon. They bring in the third. It is Whiscash, and this is where having that Brave Bird can come in handy. Opponent's expecting the Fly. Brave Bird lands, and I go from a very tough situation now in the driver's seat of this battle. I will be able to no-shield that Dragon Claw, and here I can just go for Surf, because at this point, I'm just looking to get as much damage as I can, because my Talonflame is my win condition at this point. So Surf number 1 gets no-shielded, Surf number 2 will get the first shield of my opponent. I'm looking to make it to the next Surf, and I die with the move. That's a little unfortunate, but that's okay because I do have 2 shields and I'm just looking for fast move pressure at this point. I do let the first one go, just because I do need to save a shield for the Whiscash and the potential for a Scald. And here, I do make a little bit of a misplay. I look at the Whiscash's health. I'm not sure if 2 Incinerates is enough to KO from that range because they are resisted, but Incinerate was buffed this new season, and look how much that 1 Incinerate did just from that previous damage. It's crazy. It does so much now. So I should have just farmed down, but either way, that's just prime example of how much damage Incinerate does. Next battle, Trevenant Lead. And here, safe swapping a Vigoroth into a Trevenant, you may think, yo, K-Pie, are you crazy? Like, that's such a terrible matchup. Not anymore. With access to Rock Slide, Vigoroth actually wins the 0 shield scenario against a Trevenant. So if your opponent brings a Trevenant to your Vig, you're guaranteed shield or switch advantage, regardless. And say you safe swap a Vigoroth and your opponent brings in a Trevenant against it, but they're quite a bit too slow on the swap, Vigoroth has a chance to win the 2 shield scenario as well. So Trevenant is no longer a good answer to Vigoroth. It's absolutely wild. But in this matchup, I'm hard counter on the lead, hard counter on the swap. Fortunately, I do bait out the Jellicent, so my Talon doesn't have to see it. So we're going to see what we can do, see if Talon has the potential to sweep here. Back in comes to Trev, and they have a Charjabug in the back. So unfortunately, I don't think I can. But look at that Incinerate damage. That's only 2 Incinerate on the Charjabug right there. Now that's 3, and that is 4. That is an insane amount of damage onto the opponent's Pokemon. I'm gonna go for the Flame Charge right there, hoping that that boosted Incinerate would be enough to take out the Charjabug, but it is not. And because it's not, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to win this match because I'm gonna get off this move to get their final shield, but that Shadow Claw KOs. And even with this extra energy, that is not enough to flip the matchup against the Trevenant. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, Lanturn into Dragonair. So another little bit of a core breaker for the team, but we are perfectly fine because we're going to swap into our Vigoroth. We're going to go for the Body Slam right away because we outpace. See what my opponent wants to do. They're just going to let it go, and now they're going to bring in a Toxapex. So again, very nice. We're able to bait this out so our Talon doesn't see it. And we are just going to spam away on the Body Slams. And if your opponent swaps out right away on like a Dragonair Lead, that is perfectly fine because you're able to get energy with your Lanturn. If you lose swap, like on a Dragonair Lead, your goal isn't necessarily to win swap. It's just to potentially bait out the hard counter to Talon and then get a ton of energy on your Talon or Lanturn. If you're able to get shield advantage in the process, that's great. But if not, your goal should just get a ton of energy. Because Dragonair is a fairly glassy, so these Surfs and Thunderbolts will eventually do quite the number to it. If it's a Talonflame, you have the Brave Bird or the Fly to really punish it. So that's what we do in this scenario. I showed the Gunshot because I know that move. Surprised it was a Gunshot. I was thinking it was going to be the Sludge Wave. But anyways, I shield that move knowing that will do more than the Body Slam from the Dragonair. And I farm all the way down with a ton of energy. And we bait out the Toxapex. My opponent has a Diggersby in the back. And Talonflame is just going to be able to close out this matchup. Diggersby is a fairly bulky Pokemon. But did you see how much that Incinerate did? Like, that's absolutely insane. They go for one Scorching Sands. They can go for another Scorching Sands. Talon's just going to shrug that off. Now I'm going to go for the Flame Charge right away. Boost up my Incinerate damage as much as I can. See if I can make it to this next one in time, which I do. And where Talon is able to close out strong, flying high above the opponents. GG's. Next battle. We lead Lanturn into another Lanturn. So we know the game plan in this one. We're going to load up, throw our Thunderbolt, and swap into our Vigoroth after our opponent throws their first charge move. Now this one does go for the extra, which is fine. We're just going to stay in, and we're going to wait until they throw their charge move, which they do here. It's the Thunderbolt, and now we're going to swap into our Vig. We're able to just barely outpace to this Body Slam before our opponent reaches their Thunderbolt, able to force a shield from our opponent, and now they bring in Trev. So like I said, generally, Vigoroth does win the 0 shield against the Trev because you do survive 2 Seed Bombs. But because my opponent got some Spark chip damage first, I'll no longer be able to survive 2 Seed Bombs, which is kind of a nice play that my opponent did, but they stayed in just a little bit too long, and they let me get to this next Rock Slide so I can force a shield, which is absolute their final shield, which is huge, but doesn't even do that. They just let their Trev go. Now they come back in with their Lanturn, have to throw Surf to take me out, and now I can just Spark on down with my own Lanturn, which I am able to do. See that they have a Lickitung in the back, so I can fire off Surf number 1 for some chip damage, Surf number 2, and now I'm going to swap into my Talonflame to close it out. As you'll notice in these matches, Talon is such a deadly closer. It is so good with that Incinerate and Flame Charge combination. My opponent realizes that they no longer have a win condition left and they concede the match. GG's to them. Next battle, Lanturn into Galvantula. So a little bit of a core breaker here, but it's really no worry just because Galv is very glassy and Lanturn is very bulky, as we all know. But I do go for a lunge, over farming a little bit, making sure I'm throwing on good timing right in the middle of the Volt Switch so they can't sneak. Surf number 1 goes off, does get a shield, which is a little surprising since they would be able to survive that. And now they go for lunge number 2. I no shield it, hoping I can just barely survive and get off my next Surf, but I don't. And that's alright, because now I can bring in my Vigoroth, go for this Body Slam here, which they survive just barely on 1 HP. So I swap it to my Talon. A little bit of a risky catch, but I'm banking on the fact they went for a lunge instead of a discharge, which they did. And now they bring in a Skarmory against my Talonflame, and you know they are just absolutely core broken in the back with the remaining Mons. Flame Charge is able to land, so I can just shield this up, Incinerate down on that Skarmory, and they have a Ferrothorn in the back, and look how much that Incinerate did. That was, we got debuffed once and then we Flame Charged, so that was back to baseline. That was a baseline Incinerate, but still, regardless, that did so much damage onto the Ferrothorn, and my opponent just lets that go. GG's. Trevenant Lead. Now we're gonna safe swap into our Vigoroth, and they meet it with an Oinkalone. Correct me whichever one it is. My guess is Oinkalone, but that is not an answer to a counter user in the Vigoroth. So we are very easily going to be able to take switch here, over farming right before their next Body Slam. This move will take their Oinkalone out, and back in comes the Trev. And if they go for a Shadow Claw down, they are gonna have to eat a Rock Slide in the process, which they do. Rock Slide going through does end up getting a shield from them, and they're still going for that Shadow Claw down. Realize they're not able to get it. They try and snipe with the Greninja, but we're able to react fast enough, get to that Body Slam, land that Body Slam on the Greninja. Now we have a fantastic answer for it in the Lanturn. We can tank 2 moves from the Greninja, no problem, but we only have to tank 1 since they went for the Hydro Cannon, and now we have our Talon for the Trev, which we swap in right away, add insult to injury, catch the Seed Bomb, and our opponent concedes the match. GG's. Next battle, we lead Lanturn into Shadow Golbat, another fantastic lead. What I've noticed through a lot of my battles with this team is that Lanturn catches a ton of really good leads, excuse me. And this is no exception. They do build up to the Shadow Ball, so I do respect it with the shield. As they are staying in, I'm planning on the Lanturn core breaking them in the back, so I want to keep it healthy. My opponent does a really nice job on reading that and ends up taking both of my shields in the process. So they do get farmed down, and I leave with a lot of energy, but now they have a shield advantage as I swap in a Shadow Victory Bell. So I'm going to swap out into my Vigoroth, again, saving that Lanturn for what I'm guessing is weak to it in the back. And boy, oh boy, is it weak to it, as it's a Mantine. Those double super effective sparks would absolutely shred it. We get to a Rock Slide that does over half the health of the Mantine. Absolutely crazy. My opponent gets a little threatened there, scared, I should say, of me reaching another move, so they go for an Aerial Ace to take out my Vigoroth. And here, my Lanturn is okay. No matter what the Mantine has to throw, it is resisted, so I can just stay in, go for the Thunderbolt. I'll lose a CMP tie, but that's perfectly fine, as we do have the Talon in the back. Oh my gosh, that incinerates so much damage. Our opponent concedes the match. GG's to them. Next battle, yet another Lanturn Lead. So it seems like our opponents have gotten the memo of a lot of lead mons being weak to Lanturn as well. In this situation, I throw right away. My opponent makes a nice catch onto an Altaria, but that's fine because Lanturn's really my only answer to Altaria anyways, so I'm just going to stay in this matchup. And since I am staying in this matchup, I do need to make sure I win switch advantage. And because my opponent lets that Thunderbolt go through, I will be able to win switch advantage, just because I want to be able to get my Vigoroth on their Lanturn instead of them being able to get the Lanturn onto my Talonflame. So down goes the Altaria, back in comes their Lanturn, and we are able to make it to a last second surf for a little bit of chip damage. And now we're going to bring in our Vigoroth. Opponent is going to go for the Thunderbolt here, but I'm not going to shield yet. No need to. I'm going to load up, go for the Body Slam right away. Do my opponent wants to do, and they end up giving up their first shield. So I'm now going to start matching shields with them. Surf comes through, is able to land, and I'm loading up extra energy again, going for the next Body Slam as soon as I get it to apply pressure to my opponent, and it ends up getting their final shield. So whatever they have in the back is weak to the Vigoroth, which is a little unfortunate since my Vig is very, very low at this point. But the best part about it, now the bright side I should say, is that my Talonflame doesn't have to go up against the Lanturn. They end up catching the Body Slam onto their Greedent. That is fine. I can just load up to two Flame Charges here, because after this Incinerate damage, the Greedent's gonna be in Flame Charge range. So one more Incinerate gets me there for the one Flame Charge for the Greedent to take it out, and the second Flame Charge to take out the low health Lanturn. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Lanturn into Skarmory. Another fantastic lead for the Lanturn. My opponent's going to save swap into a Poliwrath, and it seems like they are core broken. And look at that, they're going straight for the pup, so I don't have to shield. Honestly, with the Lanturn against the Shadow Poliwrath matchup, you can kind of just go straight Surf. Just make sure you're building up to a Thunderbolt, because the spark damage does enough where they kind of have to respect the Thunderbolt, and when they shield the Surf, the spark damage does enough where by the time you get to the second Surf, it's kind of enough to KO anyways. So we are able to take a shield advantage and take out the Poliwrath. So now we get to align our Vigoroth to the Whiscash and our Talonflame to the Skarmory. Honestly, if my opponent wanted to make a play for switch there, I was fine with it, just because Vig doesn't really have that bad of a matchup against Skarm, just because again now it does have access to Rock Slide. But my opponent does end up giving me switch advantage and shield advantage, which is really nice. So now I can just shield up that Brave Bird and farm this Skarmory all the way down. I know that this is just enough for the Sky Attack, so I let it go, and I do leave with two moves for the two Flame Charges, I should say, for the Whiscash. My opponent does let the first one go, recognizing that if I had Fly, it wouldn't be enough, that I'm most likely not going to go for the Brave Bird off the bat. So that the boosted Fly or boosted Brave Bird is enough to force that final shield, but that's perfectly fine. because Vig can survive to take out the Whiscash, and I only have one lose condition here. I no-shield a Blizzard, and oh, my opponent is still running the nuke move of Blizzard over Scald, so that was a very fortunate shield for us, as we do take that one as well. GG's to my opponent. I am so looking forward to this new season titled Timeless Travels. These move changes are always a fresher breath air to see, and seeing Pokemon like Skarmory and Talonflame back on top, it really is a blast from the past. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.